This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, Chair Geltner, I think if you're there still, I'm losing track of who's here. Frank, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sitting in the Madison airport, so there's a lot of noise.
Would you like to have Claire run the meeting and just listen and
Yeah,
participate?
yeah, Claire, go ahead and run the meeting. I'll just listen.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Lincoln County Fair Board to order at 10:02 a.m. We have approval of minutes for May 13th and June 10th. Chair Geltner did note some corrections. Mr. Beisman and I did not have any corrections, so without objection, the minutes will stand approved as corrected. And we move on to agenda item number 2, other business. And first up, OSU Extension and 4-H update fair event. Todd, take it away.
Hi, this is Heather. I think Todd's having trouble connecting. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have his list, so I'm just gonna read his email he sent me. And then if he can chime in, he will, but he is texting me. He says he's having a hard time connecting, so. So I guess we'll go over how fair went. He has a profit and loss statement. I don't know if Chrissy can pop that up on the screen or not. But he has that from this year. He said that food vendor revenue was up. He's not sure what garbage was because of the fact that we had chucked a bunch of stuff from the Harney building. But he's pretty sure that the garbage was up as well. Porta potties were up. The rodeo revenue was up. The music venue was very well attended. Food court and main hall was very busy. In fact, the food vendors, several of them, were very pleased with the turnout. They said that they made more money than they did in 2019. We have had a couple, in fact, sell out early, both, I think just Friday night. So the food vendors were very pleased, very busy. The camel revenue was light, but we talked them into doing the free rides since the monster truck vendor canceled at the last minute. So it was kind of a wash, but it was a great attraction for the fair and brought a lot of people in. And then he said the rodeo cowboy entries were down slightly due to the added money. We didn't have as high added money as we did in 2019. And then several of the other rodeos in the area canceled. And a lot of the cowboys will come for several rodeos on the west side. Like they'll do ours and and things like that. And they just ended up staying over east because of the ones that got canceled on our side. He said rodeo ended at about $12,000 positive. And sorry. So it looks like rodeo did really well. And then he said, all in all, I think it was a great year. He's guessing attendance is up, but we're going to stay around the 20 to 25,000 total, just because of the odd year with COVID. So that's kind of the fair recap. Do you guys have any questions that I can maybe answer?
Christy, can you scroll down just a little bit more so we can see the bottom line on the P&L? There. Thank you. That's perfect right there.
I don't have any questions. Anyone else?
No.
All
I'm
right.
good.
Yeah, looks
Okay,
good.
and then And then Todd had two more things on his list. He says they're big asks. The first one is regarding the bleachers. So we've rented 2 sets of our bleachers consistently since we've owned them for 4 years. And then he says they've produced almost enough revenue to cover the cost of one of the sets over the 4 years. And then Lake Oswego School District is renting them for their football season. They have them from September through January. And we've had several requests from the rodeo company to rent them out, and we can't since Lake Oswego already has them. So he's proposing to replace the fixed bleachers that are on the east end of the rodeo arena because they are coming to the end of their life. And he says that if we could get 2 more sets, we can use them in the redevelopment because they're mobile, they're movable, and they're about $62,000 each. And he said he can get a discount if he orders more than 1 set. So he'd like to order 2 more sets at not more than $164,000, in hopes that he can get them before October so he can start renting them out to the rodeo company.
Wait a minute, what did he say the individual sets were?
62,000 each.
But he wants 164,000 to buy 2 sets?
No more than that. I don't know
Well,
if he did his math right. I think he means 124.
Yeah, the numbers here are not computing.
Yeah,
He should need no more than around 125,000.
correct. And he said he can get a discount if he orders more than 1 set, so he should not go above that number. I think he was typing this before he left for vacation, so he probably just got his numbers mixed up.
So where's the money coming from?
I think he's planning on regaining that money from renting them out like he has the other 2 sets.
Well, I understand that, but he's got to front it somehow.
Yeah, where's the front end cost come from?
I think
I'm
this would
not
have to come
sure.
from the Fair Facilities Fund. As capital expenditures for the Fair Facilities Fund, with the idea you'd have to make a specific determination that this will be, utilizable in the redevelopment of the commons. So
Well,
this is
is there that much
kind of,
money
it's like
there? Do we have,
is there $160,000 there? Yes, more than that, significantly more than that.
is it fit within the parameters of the acceptable uses of the fund and,
Yes, because it's a
separately?
capital expenditure for the redevelopment. That part of what you can do in the redevelopment obviously is build facilities and buy equipment for the, capital equipment for the redevelopment of the commons. But you'd need to make that specific determination that this is a purchase that will, fit in with the future redevelopment of the commons. And that's, I think, the argument that Todd's making.
Well, I will make a motion that we approve this request.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve this request for purchase of 2 new bleachers from the Fair Facilities Fund. And Frank, if you're comfortable with a friendly amendment clarifying that the Fair Board finds that these are purchases which will be incorporated into the fairgrounds redevelopment.
That's fine, and you feel free to add a clause about recouping some of the money if that's necessary.
That's not required. We'll just make sure that any money that does come back, goes to the operations item.
Okay,
That's
Okay.
And I
So,
guess the other thing is make sure we got the amount right.
Well, I was thinking, and that's a good question, Jim, is what you're really authorizing is the purchase of 2 sets of bleachers at a cost approximately $6,000 per set. And if that changes in any manner, significantly above that, then we'll come back.
Yeah, we're not authorizing the 164,000 or whatever
No.
it was number. We're authorizing like it'd be about 5,000.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, I'll call the question
Okay.
then. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion's approved. Okay, what's next on our agenda? Or
Okay, the second one, second ask he has is about panels. He says each year we purchase $3,000 to $5,000 in rodeo panels due to the weather in our area. They corrode quickly. And this year we lost 2 of the bull chutes, which are $6,000 each. And we had to run the rodeo with just 4 chutes. The chutes he says that we have are no longer available, so we have to eventually replace all 6. So he says to limp our current resources another year will cost a minimum of $30,000, 24,000 in bull chutes, 5 for this, 5 for another chute. I'm not sure what he's meaning here. And then a little over about 5,000 to replace several more weather damaged panels. There are several companies that make much more weather resistant galvanized panels and chutes that are modular and will be able to use at our current configuration and then modified when we get the new arena. So he said he had hoped that we'd buy new metal ones once we relocated the arena and avoid moving them a second time. But he says he doesn't think we can wait until the redevelopment to do that. So he says new metal, including bull chutes, stripping chute, back panels, rail panels, all the way around the arena will cost about $70,000. And he'd like approval to explore the cost of the replacing the panels in the arena before next fair. So I think he just wants an okay to start looking into this if we have the money to do so.
I don't see a problem.
I don't either. Jim?
Well, I take it all at the moment. This is just an information item.
Yeah, I don't
I
think there's
believe,
a motion.
yeah,
We
I
don't need a
believe
motion.
I think he's just looking to see if it's okay if he starts looking into that and if it's something worth taking his time to do at this point.
I think you can tell him it's consensus of the board that we're comfortable with him further exploring this.
It's up to him, but yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. I will let him know.
Okay, do you
Right.
have anything else for us?
I think that is all we have. I do know, I did see the Halloween event for the school on the agenda. I know that our Trick or Treat Street, we'd normally do it at the aquarium, but because of they're putting new exhibits in and they're still working on their upgrades, they're not allowing us to use their facility for Trick or Treat Street. So I think 4-H will be using the main hall for Trick or Treat Street this year, and I'm not sure if that came up last meeting or not. But I did want to mention it just in case it did not. So we'll be using the main hall the week of Halloween, and our event will be Saturday the 30th.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, Christy, could we go back to the agenda, please? And Haunted House fundraiser was the next agenda item, but did I hear Amy say that they've canceled?
Yeah, they decided with the COVID numbers rising, they just didn't want to put in the work and then have to cancel themselves.
Okay, so I guess then the potential conflict is solved. Thank you. Bruce McGuire, you're next, and we see your smiling face. Sir.
Thank you. Well, I have a request from the Fair Board for the search and rescue to be able to use the fair property for training purposes. We have several of our people that are members of they're volunteer members of our SAR team that are actually working on and training dogs. The fair facility is one of those places where it's close enough to our SAR building, and it's someplace that it's contained, so we can kind of continue to have the dogs work in an area where it's uninterrupted. And one of the things that we saw with that is that it's, you know, obviously a fenced area and everything. We would like to get permission from you, the board, to access that property for training purposes for not only our search and rescue team, but also for our dogs to be trained and get them up to speed for the type of training they're doing. The dogs are currently right now working on human trailing, and one of them is working on HRD, which is a human remains detection. So those are the two main training things that we're working with them, but we would just respectfully request access to the property if we can, and use it for training purposes.
Okay, what kind of time frame are we talking about?
Well, the dog training is going to be it goes on for several months. The dogs are, you know, they don't meet every day. They usually meet a couple times a week. And sometimes it's maybe once a week, maybe it's a couple times a month, just depends on the schedule for the trainer. So it would just mean access for those couple of dogs and dog handlers to be able to get in there. We would do stuff mostly in the evening time or on the weekends, as long as there's nothing else going on in the facility. We would want to have an idea of, you know, if we could get a calendar of the events that are currently planning, so we can make sure that we don't try to overlap during that time. That would be great, and then that way we can, you know, don't have any conflicts or anything like that.
2 questions, Bruce. First, who's going to be the lead person in the sheriff's office on this? You?
Me.
All right, so you'll be our point of contact.
Correct.
Second of all, do you currently have access, or are you going to need keys, or what's still there?
We currently don't have access, Jim. We would need a set of keys, and that would be something that I would have at our SAR building. We have a little lockbox that we keep keys and stuff in, so it would be something we could secure there. That we keep.
Jack has everything on. Sorry, Bruce. Jack has everything on combination locks now, so we'll just get you the combos.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that would work. That would be it. Basically, is just I'd be the point of contact, and then we would just have those people going in there to work, and I would entrust my my dog handlers to be. They're pretty diligent folks, so they would be able to, you know, not just give that combination out to everybody. I mean, we entrust them to come into our building and everything like that with the code system. So we would keep it secure.
I don't have any problem with this. Frank, Claire?
I don't. Frank, what do you think?
I'm comfortable.
Okay, so should we put this as a formal motion? Just to get it on record.
Why don't you do that?
I'll move that we allow the sheriff's office, I assume it's formally under the sheriff's office, Bruce?
It is.
Okay,
Correct.
allow the sheriff's office to use the grounds at such times that it's not being used by others for training purposes, and that they be given the appropriate codes for access and anything else that might be necessary for them to carry out the mission as described by Senior Deputy McGuire.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? not, I'll call for the question on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimously approved. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you. And who will be my point of contact for the calendar for the fair so as not to try to schedule something on top of another event that's there? Who would be
Amy.
You'll contact me, Bruce.
Okay.
We'll get you set up.
Great. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
And thank you.
All right.
Thank all of you board members for allowing us to do this. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and sign out of the meeting. Okay.
Okay.
We got you covered now, Bruce. Anything else you need here on this?
I don't think. Oh, wait, there is that $50 you owe me, Jim, so I can take my wife out to dinner.
Yeah, you know what the chances of that are, Bruce, don't you?
I know where you live, so I'll just park out in front of your house. Wait for it.
Good luck
All
with
right.
that one.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right,
Thanks,
we'll see you
Bruce.
later.
Okay, now, Amy, did I hear that Loretta Montgomery of HHS had also canceled out?
Yep, same reason, COVID concerns.
Okay, so then we move on to project manager for the Commons project, and the agenda calls for Kristen Yule and Steve Hodge, and I see Steve. Is Kristen on the line?
No, she's not.
Okay.
She asked me to address the board this morning. Apparently, we're at a point where a project manager should be selected for the build out the new exhibit hall at the fairgrounds, and that's the topic of discussion for this morning. So I'm just tossing it out there. What do you guys think about getting this project moving?
What are you looking to do, Steve? Put out an ad, a recruitment notice, and start the process of hiring one?
Yes, that person would report to this office, and I guess at that point we would start pulling this project together.
Well, Wayne, let me rehash for just a minute now on the actual physical doing of the project. I guess the first question is that with respect to the county itself, which office we're going to run it through? Public Works, as we have in the past with other projects?
That would be the direction it would go. Yes, that at least they would, again, we're, as Steve indicated, they're talking about hiring somebody to come in and do it. And remember, there's a series, it's not just the exhibition hall. There's a series of things that go with the redevelopment of the commons, and they all kind of fall into place. And maybe I can give the quick update on the animal shelter. Steve's involved with the animal shelter too. We're moving forward. The consultants have been hired. We're starting that process of involving stakeholders and others to get the plan together. We're finalizing, we'll be finalizing an application for a conditional use permit to relocate, because that's sort of the linchpin for all these projects, is to move the animal shelter off the current common site, and then other things can start taking place. So there's funding for that particular project is established. There's funding that's established for the development of the emergency services transit center, which is going to be located on the east side of the commons. Of course, it needs to happen after the animal shelter is relocated. So again, that falls into place. But then what Steve's talking about is really all these projects are going to be coming to fruition, here in the next few years. And we need somebody as a representative of our organization to basically undertake these particular projects. So it's really inclusive of a whole series of projects.
So you're talking about a person that the county's going to bring on staff as a project manager to work through these series of projects, of which the commons is one. And each of these projects will have its own, if you will, budget and funding to pay for, amongst other things, the proportional share or whatever it is of this project manager's time. I'm assuming we're talking about hiring a full-time person, given the scope of the projects that you've just laid out, knowing what they are. And this person will maybe actually working on several of them at one time, but generally working their way through these series of projects for the county. They'll be headquartered in Public Works. They'll report to Mr. Hodge. Have I basically got what you guys are planning correct?
Well, yes, but with some clarifications. I think that, Steve, and you correct me if I'm wrong with this, I don't think it's been decided it's going to be an employee that's going to come and do this. It may be that we actually execute a contract, a multi-year contract with somebody.
That's my
Or
understanding.
with a firm. Yeah, I think that's the intent, is actually not to have an employee, but a firm that's going to manage this.
Yes.
And do
Well,
it.
you're going to have okay, so you're going to contract with a firm as opposed to bringing aboard a specific individual.
Or it could be contracted with an individual, that obviously has a business of doing this kind of work. So I think as I understand it, Steve, and correct me again if I'm wrong, the direction is not to look at hiring an employee at this point.
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
So
My-
is it
And
going to
in
be,
terms of, it'll be, Public Works will be managing either managing the contract, or if there was an employee, would manage the employee, would do that. But, all these the details in terms of where the person would be located, where they might work out of, all that's yet to be determined.
My
but it's
question,
going to be an ongoing and running kind of process, if you
That's the
will.
intent.
Okay. Frank has a question.
yeah, I'm just curious, why is this a fair board issue and not a county commissioner issue?
Well, that's a good question. And I think that what this is really intended, and I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to talk to Kristen about this part. What we were really trying to do is inform the fair board that this is where things are going. Because obviously the fair is very involved in watching the redevelopment of the commons, as the commons is the home of the Lincoln County Fair. So I think this is actually going to be a county decision. You're right, Frank, in terms of moving this forward. But we just want to make sure the fair board is fully aware of what's going on, and you're a partner obviously in this whole process.
So this is an informational item rather than a decision item for the fair board.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right, but I do think that Frank, since our project is one of the projects they're talking about, obviously we have to be in the loop.
Right.
Right.
But we don't need to vote.
Nope.
No, it's an informational item,
Right. Okay.
not a decision item.
Can
All
I
right.
ask time frame, Steve? What's the time frame here on this? Are you going to be moving in the next month, next 6 months, next year? What are we talking about?
Don't really have a time frame nailed down right now. We're just starting off, but I would certainly hope within the next 6 months.
I think, Steve, that's a very reasonable time frame.
Okay, I mean, we were hoping to get ground broke, for the commons redo in sometime in this century.
Yeah, and remember, Jim, that what's really kind of holding things up a little bit is the linchpin for all of these projects, especially around the commons, is the relocation of the animal shelter, and that's front and center. And Steve's working on that. He's actually managing that project right now. So once we get the pieces of that thing together, then the other ones can fall into place and everything can happen.
We can't work around the animal shelter stuff on the commons.
No, mainly because the next project that's in the loop for getting done is the emergency services transit, and that has to have the shelter relocated.
You're telling me we can't handle more than one project at once?
Well, that's a decision for the board and for Steve and the project person to do, in terms of the timing of doing it. I will say this, Jim, remember that the process, and remember that if you remember back to our master plan for this, the funding is already identified and in place for the animal shelter, transit, and the emergency services. For the rest of the commons redevelopment, we have a significant amount of money collected, but we still have to do some financing for the overall redevelopment of the rest of the commons. So that's why it's not there yet completely in terms of putting together the whole funding package. We know what we want to do. We know where we need to go, but that is not secured. The money is not yet secured for the whole package for redevelopment of the commons.
Well, I'm being a little, whatever you want to call it here, but if we do these projects linearly, you know, do complete one before we start another one, and just do them in that manner. I mean, we'll be 10, 15 years getting just the 3 projects or so that you've put out there by the time we go through the permitting and all the rest of it. And I'm suggesting, I guess, that particularly since you're talking about contracting with a project management firm, I don't know of any reason why they couldn't multitask, if you will. I mean, a great deal of the commons thing, for instance, takes place on the west side of Harney. Assuming the money's in place for the various projects and the commission, the board of commissioners has approved them, I don't know why we can't get this project manager on board and get more than one of them rolling at the same time.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, especially with the commons side of things, you know, on
Yeah,
the
that's
on the
my
western
hope
side.
too.
Yeah. And that's something,
What
you
was
know,
that,
that's part of
Claire?
the discussion. But again, the difference between the kinds of elements of the projects is two phases. The animal shelter, emergency services, transit are fully funded and ready to go. And physically, you can't do the emergency services. You can't start work on that until you relocate the shelter, because that's where it's going. That's part of where it's going there. So, you know, physically, those got to be coordinated together. But you're right. You could start and do the work on the west side, you know, pulling all that stuff together with the overall plan. Sooner rather than later, just got to put together the rest of the funding. I mean, again, the funding source is there through the room tax dedicated for this process, but we have to put together the rest of the total funding package.
Well, okay, I guess I just leave it this way. I mean, it seems to me that we would multitask, and insofar as the facilities or the projects allow, and also insofar as the money allows, particularly if we're going to bring a project manager, contract firm, or whatever it is on board, we do it now. Otherwise, it's going to be, seriously, it's going to be years and years before we get to the end of the line, guys.
Don't disagree.
No, I'm totally with you, Jim. And even if we don't have all the financing in place for the commons side of things, you know, we know that the exhibit hall is the biggest ticket item, but you know, my thinking has been listening to the discussion is certainly we could start covering the arena or getting a barn replacement going, something just to get some momentum and you know, not be looking at 10 to 15 years out before all of this is done.
No, and that's not the intent. It's again, it's putting, and actually this is the first step, is getting somebody in place, the project management team that can actually then schedule all these events and work on things that can work parallel. That's great.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to get into paralysis by analysis and all of that kind of thing. I mean, anytime you do a project, Steve knows this perfectly well, that you never know everything when you start. That simply isn't really possible. You just you know, when you're confident you've got a reasonable handle on it, you dive in and get going. And I'm just suggesting that insofar as it's possible, if we're going to bring a project manager on board, we don't confine that to just one of these projects. Insofar as it's possible, we dive into all of them where we can.
Well, Jim, there's one area that we could look at that's common to all of these facilities, and that's going to be the infrastructure, sewer, water, you know, phone lines, that kind of stuff. And as we get started, I would suggest that that's probably one of the areas that we could dig in that would go ahead and get the whole thing moving as we wait for the animal shelter to be switched over. It's common, it's fundamental to all 3 projects.
I couldn't agree with you more. That, I mean, and that's what I'm talking about. There are some things like that that we could bring the manager on board, let the contract for it, have somebody go out there and start digging and putting those things in place. Eventually, it's going to have to be done one way or the other. There's no reason why they couldn't do those types of things on the site now while you're doing some of the other things with respect to the relocation of the animal shelter.
Right.
Right. Further thoughts?
Well,
just
I
a note.
agree. I agree with where you're going on this. I do think that Jim's concern comes from years of experience, and I think Steve brings up a good point about the infrastructure being the infrastructure for everything, and it's important that we have a mind that's got they're wrapped around the bigger picture.
Well, Steve, are you aware of any reason why a project manager, as you envision it anyway, couldn't coordinate, I guess is the word I'll use, things amongst the projects to, I don't really want to say accelerate the time frame, but let me put it this way: minimize the time frame so we get these projects completed sooner rather than later.
I'm hesitant to kind of get too deep into the details right now. I think that's something that over the next couple of months, as we ratchet up and start delving into this, that we'll be able to come up with some answers for. I'm just too cold on the project right now to be able to answer that.
But you are, I know you understand where I'm trying to go, right?
Yes, I totally do understand where you're trying to go. And I do believe, infrastructure is probably one of those things that we could look at that would expedite the overall process.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm not up to speed enough on some of these other details like the transit facility, emergency services, and that kind of thing. I need a deeper dig into that.
Well, Steve, are you involved with those, or Wayne, is it being coordinated through Steve?
We're going to be coordinating it through Steve. I mean, this is all part of it's part of the master plan redevelopment for the commons. It's what you and the Board of Commissioners approved as part of the master plan. Now we're getting into the details for how do you accomplish that? Where do you get the funding, first of all? How do you phase these particular developments? And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of work that can be done, the infrastructure related. It's going to serve the entire redevelopment plan. And there is another part to this too, in terms of the funding, is we do have some possible urban renewal money that will help with the infrastructure side of things. So that's another possible funding source, and we'll have to work with the city in terms of, what is it that needs to be done out there for these particular projects. So eventually, yes, this is all going to be part of the overall implementation of the master plan.
Well, my key point here is that these projects are interlocking, and that means that there's got to be a specific individual. In this case, it appears that it's going to be Steve at the county as county engineer, who's going to, oversee and coordinate the activities to make all of this happen. And again, I'm not necessarily, sorry, Steve, not necessarily looking to dump a bunch of stuff on your desk, but, I think the Board of Commissioners has to appoint some individual to oversee the projects and get the project manager and work with the project manager and so forth. And there needs to be a single point of contact because you've got the interlocking nature of the projects. Is this all making sense?
It is. And once we get this project manager on board, we'll be getting our hands around all of these projects, and we'll be looking for ways to expedite the development.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm sorry to take time to discuss that.
No,
All right.
no, it's important. Okay, I think we've reached the point of moving on from this agenda item, and I assume we'll continue to have regular Fair Board updates as things move along. Next on the agenda, and who has COVID testing at the Commons?
Amy again. So
Hi.
I spoke with Jane Romero at HHS, and they are looking for a kind of longer term COVID testing spot. She had spoke with Commissioner Hunt, and he asked that I discuss that with her further. So they have temporary COVID testing at Samaritan, but they're not going to be able to use the site much longer. So they're wanting to move over around November. Jack and I talked about it, and we'd, upon Fair Board approval, we'd both like to see kind of the same drive-through clinic at the fairgrounds that happened last year. I don't know if any of you went to that. It was actually pretty slick. You drove through the livestock barn, and then all the testers were in the livestock barn. You stayed in your car and you drove through. And kind of Jack's thought on that was if we did start redevelopment on, say, the main hall area, we could fence that off and it wouldn't interfere.
Okay, so questions, Frank or Jim?
Do we need to
So,
vote?
so they're just looking for permission to do this? Is that, am I understanding that correctly? Permission to use the grounds?
Yes.
Can
And I might
we need a
suggest that
motion, Wayne?
this is probably subject to a couple of things. One is obviously we're continuing on with the emergency. COVID has kind of come back into focus in terms of responses here, and so both testing is what they're initially asking for here, but who knows? It may be something in the future where they're talking about booster vaccines, that kind of stuff, and looking for locations to do that. We really don't know where this is going, but obviously there's going to be an intersection between their requests and using a facility, and of course the Commons proved to be an incredible asset for responses to both the wildfire and COVID. As a location for doing things. And so it's good. We're going to have some flexibility with how we go forward with this in relation to both utilization for other intended purposes for the commons, as well as the redevelopment. So I think what you want to do is probably give permission, but periodically review the status and the requests and the needs and make sure that it's all coordinated.
I think, Wayne, that given that we're talking about the virus and so forth, and I mean, we've all seen the nature of this. I think it basically just kind of goes with the territory. We're going to give them permission to go in there and start doing this testing or whatever it is, but that's going to be subject to change and review, literally at a moment's notice, depending upon what happens with the virus itself and some of these other factors. I think that at the very least needs to be just understood that goes with the territory here.
Okay, Frank?
Yeah, I'm good. My only thought was when you're talking about all these things that the Commons is good for, do we see any need to revisit the larger plan, or do we think what we've got planned for the future will satisfy the needs that have been expressed through COVID and wildfires and so forth?
I think honestly that generally, yes, the commons is what we've got in the future will serve those future needs that occur, but there may be more when the devil's in the details, right? When you get down to the specific designs on facilities, there may be some features we want to incorporate into some of those designs that address some of these other issues. So that's ventilation will be an issue, as you can think, backup generators and capacity for energy in if there's an actual crisis that needs you need to have that as a standalone facility. Those kinds of things will all go into the mix in the discussion on the details. But the general plan of what's in the master plan, I think, is very conducive to continuing these kinds of activities.
I
Okay,
agree
well,
with that. And Frank, I mean, the fact is that, again, you never know everything going into a project. So we've got a plan. We think it's going to be suitable for the purposes and so forth. We get started on it, but there will undoubtedly be changes and change orders and so forth as we go along with the project, and bring it to fruition. I mean, that's just the nature of these beasts.
okay, well then I would make a motion to the effect that they would like to use the facility for the testing.
I'll second.
Okay, have a motion and a second to authorize HHS to conduct COVID testing at the Commons. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Nay. So it passed unanimously. And our last agenda item is county staff update. Jack, Roy, you on the line? Do you have anything?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Is Jack on the call?
Don't believe so.
Okay.
All right.
Then we're
So
at the end.
Claire,
Yes.
Hey all, it's Todd. I hope my audio signal is stable for a moment. Can I have
It
about
is.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
My apologies. I tried several different ways to get online, and I managed to hear Heather presenting my cliff notes. So thank you, Heather, for doing that. I think she did a great job. The one thing I really wanted to stress or recap was that we went into this this fair year, in the understanding, and my request from you was that we were going to lose about $10,000 to $20,000 probably to do this event. And we felt like it was important enough to do for the community to go ahead and spend some of the money that we've made on this event over the years to facilitate that. And I wanted you all to recognize that although we did lose some sponsorship and donations through some hard work, good effort, some tightening of the purse strings, we actually came out what I think is going to be $14,000 to $15,000 to the positive at the end of the day instead of negative. And I was delighted to see that. And again, just a big thank you for your confidence in allowing this to happen. I think it was a great event. You saw all my little notes on positives. There were very few negatives, and I was just delighted to see it come off the way that it did. So thank you all again for the support and the confidence to make this event happen for the people in our county. I think it was great. I heard the approval of the bleachers. I'll get working on that on Monday. Thank you so very much. We definitely have proven, I think, that 2 more sets would be worth having, and work with our build out plans as we move forward. And yes, on the metal for the arena, I was just looking for a blessing. I don't want to spend a bunch of legwork doing that if we're not at that point yet. But if it occurred to me that rather than nickel diming this, this metal will all be metal that we will use for the redevelopment. And although it takes probably 60 to 80 hours to set everything up, it's certainly something that we can set up and move. And I just wanted everybody to know that I think we're at the useful end of the current metal that we have, panels, chutes, etc. And I will start looking into the availability and ability to replace that stuff this coming fair year. I just don't see a way without at least spending $30,000, as Heather mentioned, to pull off a rodeo next year. And it seems to me if we're going to spend 30, let's just have all new metal that we move to the new facility when it's ready to go, or the relocated arena, however that happens to shake out. So that's all I had. I just wanted to say thank you so very much, and look forward to what comes for next year.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Anything from Frank or Jim for Todd?
No,
I
All
don't
right.
have anything for Todd, but I have something else.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
It's really for you, Claire.
All
I would
right.
certainly like to see the Board of Commissioners move ahead on the reconstitution of the Fair Board as we have discussed.
Yes, I would too.
And particularly since we're starting about talking or got tongue tied there. Particularly since we're talking about getting started on those series of projects. I think it's important that the Board of Commissioners get that done sooner rather than later. So I'd like to put a bug in your ear to
Okay.
talk to the other two commissioners and get that going.
And Mr. Belmont, that was, I believe, something you were shepherding through. Can you give us any update on that?
Sure. We've got actually two projects that we're working on here to kind of move things forward. One is that I'm going to be working on finalizing with you guys, the current Fair Board, a formalization of the arrangements around all the things we've been talking about here. That talk about who has responsibility for the redevelopment of the commons. The using the philosophy that the commons is the home and the major tenant is obviously the Lincoln County Fair, the home of the Lincoln County Fair, getting that relationship information all in a document that's approved by both the board and the Fair Board. And then getting that process of seeking new Fair Board members. I know over the last couple of years, we've had several people step forward who have expressed an interest in serving on the Fair Board and working with the Fair event and doing that. So we'll be doing those two things simultaneously to get these done, but that'll move forward so that we can eventually, at this point, I know the current, I'll call them temporary Fair Board, it would like to move on to other things and get other people in place, but we'll be working towards accomplishing that in the next few months.
very good.
12 years and counting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Claire, I think temporary has kind of gone by the wayside here. And,
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and I've made this comment before, since I think the new Fair Board needs to be in place as we move into the projects so that they have the institutional memory of what we did and why we did it and so forth. I don't think the current Fair Board should put this stuff in place and then try and hand it off to somebody new who doesn't have any of the history. So I think it's very important that we get this new Fair Board in place as quickly as possible so that they are the ones who walk through the process. They're the ones who got the history and the knowledge.
Here, here. Okay.
All right, we'll be working on both of those.
Okay. Any final words for the good of the order?
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Frank. Okay. Right now, the next regular meeting of the Lincoln County Fair Board is tentatively scheduled for September 9th, 2021 at 10 a.m. And until then, we're adjourned.
Thank you all.